Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, we are back for another great episode of A Moment with the Minister, hosted by Dr. Torian Salary and Brother John McBride III. Brother Torian, how are you doing, my brother, on this wonderful morning?
Man, I'm doing very well, brother. Just a little under the weather, but I'm not going to allow that to stop the show. The show must go on.
I hear that, brother. I hear that. I know you're under the weather, but I'd rather you be under the weather than under the ground. You hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So glad to have you back. I know last week we did the show with Brother Allen, and which was a great, phenomenal show. We missed you. But how was your birthday, man? Did you get any good gifts and good food?
It was good. It was a good day, man. Good birthday. I spent it with my family. And we just kind of ate at the house, just kind of stayed local and did the home thing this year. My daughter's birthday is a few days after mine, and I didn't want to let that overshadow hers. So we just kind of did the low-key thing for my birthday on Sunday so that we can gear up for her big day on Thursday.
I hear that. I hear that. It's nothing like having a great time for your birthday. Speaking of time, what was your title on last Sunday, and what did you come from scripture-wise?
Yeah, last Sunday, man, the title was a play on Michael Jackson's song, one of his many songs, obviously, and it was called "Do You Remember the Time?" and it came from Psalm chapter 77, and we really touched on verses 10 through 15, but the focal point was verse number 11.
Yeah. Do you remember the times? I remember that song growing up, being in elementary school, man, enjoying that song and really seeing the significance it had when it came out, because that was one of the videos that was like a world premiere on the network stations, the ABCs and the Foxes and all those. So it was a real dynamic experience. But there's no other dynamic experience than being a child of God and seeing what he does and still continues to do daily.
Yeah.
So let me read that scripture, Psalm chapter 77, verse 11, and I'll be reading it from the ESV version. I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. Remember the deeds. So why is it so easy for us to forget in our lives when God has shown up and shown out?
Brother, it's so easy to forget because we expect it. Like, it happens so regularly that, I hate to say it, but we just kind of gloss over it. We kind of take it for granted, and we don't really focus or think deeply on what God has done. If I go to bed tonight, I just expect to wake up in the morning. We don't really think about it as, Lord, help me, bless me, touch me so that I can wake up. We just expect to wake up.
Yeah.
And every second of your life, you have been breathing to stay alive. You don't think about, Lord, please give me my next breath. You just do it, and it happens. As a matter of fact, it has been happening every single second of your life. And so it has become something that we just expect to happen. We don't think about it. So we forget all those times that God showed up and showed out in our lives because we just almost expect it to happen. And there's some danger in that. But again, if God bailed me out of every bad situation I've ever been in, then I just expect him to do it for every bad situation I'm going to be in. And so sometimes that makes me forget when he actually does show up and do some remarkable things in my life.
On this past Sunday, you also read verse 2 of that same chapter of Psalms, which reads, in the day of my trouble, I seek the Lord. In the night, my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. Now, in the days when I'm troubled, what can reaching out to God do for me? Like we just read in verse 2.
Yeah. So in the days of your trouble, man, it allows you to really focus. Now, I don't want people to, misunderstand what we're saying here. You should not only think of God when you are in trouble, but those are the moments in life where you need to really recall what he's done in the days of thy trouble, as the Bible, as verse 2 number says. And so when you reach out to God, when you focus on that, like what verse 2 says, it will allow you to have some peace in the midst of the storm. It'll have you to be at peace, even though the world around you is in chaos and turmoil. It'll have you to just have that relaxation, that tranquility when people may wonder and see you at work and know what your story or your situation is, and wondering, man, how do you hold it together so well? Like, it's almost like nothing is even bothering you. And it's because we are remembering in the days of our trouble what the Lord has done for us. And as I mentioned in the sermon, if you can recall what he's done in the past, then there's no need to even fret or worry about the future, because it's the same God that delivered me yesterday. It's going to deliver me today. And I can rest assured that he'll deliver me tomorrow.
I think there's so many times when we are dealing with issues and troubles in our lives, and when other people see us weathering it, but yet when we go home, and we are so frustrated, we are so upset, we're so angry that we don't want to say anything to God. We don't want to express how we truly feel, because we always say the phrase, well, he knows my heart, he knows what I'm going through, but yet it's still deeper than that. So I ask you, how do we learn to address our issues verbally to God when I'm too upset to say or pray anything to him, meaning
Yeah.
our Father?
That's a tough question, brother. But I know it might be, easier said than done. But I think that's when you go to God. I think when you are upset, I think when you are, in a sense, frustrated with what in your mind is a lack of response from God, I think that's when you go to God, right? Yes, absolutely. God knows my heart. God knows what I'm going to say. He knows what I'm feeling. But that's when you approach God, even if you've got a little bit of anger in you, hopefully not. Even if you got a little bit of hostility, a little bit of frustration, a little bit of aggravation, that's when you go to God, because God knows that even in your anger, even in your toughest times, you're still able to reach out to me. It's no different than our relationships. If you're upset or going through a tough situation with your spouse or your kids, that's not the time to avoid it. That's the time to confront it and say, listen, I understand I blew up, or I understand this thing isn't peaches and creams right now, but here's how I feel. I felt like you betrayed me. I felt like you did this. I felt like I was wrong in this. And so that's when that conversation needs to happen. So even though things might be tough, we've got to learn to address our issues verbally, even if I'm upset, because that's when God is all ears, for lack of better words. That's when he's ready to listen. That's when he's willing to help you in your toughest times. But what we do is we shut down, we stay to ourselves, we certainly block out God because we feel like God is to blame, and we kind of become isolated. And that's when a whole lot of other issues that we can talk about on a whole nother show start to fester, versus just talking about it and letting your request be known, even as the Bible tells us to do.
I think so many times young people, and as well as non-Christians, don't tend to think that we go through troubles too. They think
Yeah.
that once we get baptized, once we become members of the body, that we will no longer have issues. But
Yeah.
that's totally wrong. And it's a myth. We will
Yeah.
always have issues, whether we're in the body or if we're not. But
Yep.
that does not mean you should not be a part of the body. That does
Yeah.
not mean you need to not give your life to Christ, because once you do, you'll be able to deal with those issues a little bit better. Not easier, but a little bit better, and have some better understanding of how do I deal with this and how I can help the next person out that's wrestling with their troubles. And
Yeah.
now you spoke about wrestling with certain things on Sunday. What happens when we are wrestling in our present and trying to remember our past?
Well, the writer Asaph, in this text, he was believed to be the author, the writer, or the transcriber of David's words. And Asaph, I think he paints a beautiful picture that depicts a connection between wrestling in the present. So all of the issues that I'm facing today, all of the trials, all of the tribulations, all of the heartache, all the pain, all the agony, all the frustration, all of the issues that I deal with today. I think he paints a beautiful picture of dealing with those issues today and remembering the past. In other words, remembering what God has done, right? As my grandmother used to say, there's nothing new under the sun. And so I'm going through some difficulty today, for example, but this isn't the first time that I've ever gone through difficulty. I've had
Mm,
difficulty all the time throughout my life, right? Thankfully, there have been more good days than bad days, but the song says there still are going to be bad days. And so, since there is nothing new under the sun, I understand you're going through a tough breakup. I
mhm,
understand that divorce is right on the edge. I understand
mhm.
you might have just lost your job. I understand you got more bills than you got money. And so you feel like, man, this is the toughest day that I've ever been through. But the psalmist is trying to get us to understand when you feel like this is your troubling day, when you feel like I'm wrestling with too much right now in the present, that is when you need to remember the past. What am I supposed to remember, Brother Salary? All the times that God was there for you in all of your other troubled days. Because again, this is not the first time you've ever experienced trouble. And what I love about one of the most popular songs we hear on the radio is Trouble Don't Last Always. And so if you could just focus on, I'm going through a tough time in the days of my trouble presently, I'm wrestling with some stuff. Here is the time that I need to focus on. God helped me in the past, so he'll help me in the present. And if I wrestle with something tomorrow, he's going to help me again in the future.
Huh. I agree with all of that. And
Mm-hmm.
I understand it, but it still seems like we reflect on our problems. Every
Yeah.
time you go to the mailbox, bill,
Yeah.
bill, bill,
Yeah.
bill, bill. Anytime you go into the house in a broken marriage, you see the person that you wonder, why did I even get married to you? You may see
Mm-hmm.
the kids running around the house like, oh my gosh, why don't y'all sit down and be quiet? You go to your
Mm-hmm.
job that you hate, but yet God has blessed you with it, but you still hate
Mm-hmm.
it. You don't like the coworkers. You're not moving up in the world.
Yeah.
You didn't graduate college, or even if you did graduate, you have this degree that you can't seem to find a job having
Yeah.
anything to do with this degree. So
Right.
why do we reflect on our problems so much, which
Yeah.
then causes lack of sleep and causes other issues?
Yeah. Well, listen, brother, I don't want to paint the picture that we're superhumans and we're supernatural beings. At the end of the day, I don't care how strong you are mentally. At the end of the day, you're still human. And God made us that way. God made us to have feelings and we have emotions and we're made to be that way. And so, yes, like you mentioned, man, you every trip to the mailbox results in seeing another bill. The marriage is questionable. The kids are questionable. You're not moving up. All of the things you just mentioned are happening, right? So that's real life. And what we do is unfortunately, we focus much more on the storms in our life versus focusing on the God in our life that has the ability to tell the storm to be quiet, that has the ability to whisper a word and the winds and the seas obey him.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
we focus so much on the problem, and man, if I could take you back to when Peter did the same thing. It's no different for Peter, right? Peter walked out on the water and did what we
Right,
would call the impossible. And as long as he kept his focus on God, right, the master of the sea, then the sea didn't matter. But it's the second he started focusing on the bills and the marriage issues and the lack of me moving up in
come
society
on
and
now.
the fact that I don't have a degree. Once Peter started focusing on all those other things, then he became a victim to his surrounding. He became the very thing that is happening around him. He started to sink. He started to drown. He started to focus on the storms and not the one who can whisper to the storm. And so, again, as humans, I think we're going to reflect on problems, which is not a major thing, right? It's impossible to forget about a bill that's been sitting on your desk for a week, and any second they're going to cut your power off. It's impossible to forget about that, right? So that's life. However, we shouldn't focus on it so much that we lose sleep at night or that it causes us to have stress or leads to other issues. One of my favorite songs, we've been talking about songs this morning. One of my favorite songs says, let go and let